But my guest this morning is Tammy Gibson, and she is an accomplished entrepreneur, storyteller, and travel historian. Her mission is to raise awareness, impact youth, and preserve pride in African American culture through her personal journey. Tammy's passion began at a young age in Chicago, Illinois. Raised by entrepreneurial parents, they modeled the importance of hard work and instilled the significance of education as the vehicle to transport her to the life of her dreams. Tammy earned her BA in African American Studies from Chicago State University. Tammy's increasing interest in African American history has led her to travel extensively to explore Africa and several cities throughout the United States to gather information about the hidden treasures of African Americans that are erased from history books. Journaling the path of her ancestors, Tammy has visited several national parks, historical landmarks, museums, markers, cemeteries, slave plantations, findings of the Underground Railroad, sleeping in slave cabins to honor the enslaved, and meeting historical leaders of the civil rights movement and descendants of the enslaved. Her ability to share valuable historical knowledge as a living historian through her presentations and replicas of artifacts that is a reminder of the history of slavery in America. Tammy's teachings of slavery have inspired the youth to learn and understand the importance of African American history and the men, women, and children who were enslaved. Tammy is also a contributing writer for the Chicago Defender. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones, Tammy Gibson. Tammy, good morning.
Good morning, Mark, and thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you. As we were talking a few minutes ago, thank you for, one, rising early. I know you said you're an early bird, but secondly, we kind of, listening audience, put this together over the last couple of days. I had an opening this morning, and I know that Tammy had just released her book, so I hit her up on social media and said, you know what, I want to interview on my show. So she sends me back a message that says, well, you know what, give me some dates. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, this Saturday's open if you don't mind doing a last minute type deal. And sure enough, she hit me back and said, this Saturday is great. And thus we are here together this morning. See, so for those of you who kind of wonder how it all comes about, sometimes I schedule way in advance. Other times it's a few days before. It really kind of depends. That's kind of like the beauty of being able to do your own thing in terms of being the producer, the talent, the director, everything.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Absolutely.
So her book is, and I am absolutely fascinated by it. That's why I've been following her on social media, because I met Tammy on Twitter. Matter of fact, her Twitter name is Sankofa. It's the same thing as her website, Sankofa Travel Her. Not Traveler, but Travel Her. Okay, Her. But anyway, she's on Twitter, and I follow her, and she always posts these great pictures of various monuments or headstones or somewhere she's been that is related to African Americans. So now she's put it together in a book, Honoring the Legacy, a guide of African American monuments and statues by Tammy Gibson. Now, her name is spelled just like it sounds, Tammy Gibson. And Tammy, I always like to do the spelling because I want folks to look you up on their search engines, whether it's Google or whatever. But I want them to look you up so they can find your book on Amazon or wherever, and at some point order it. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the interview. But this is a fascinating topic to me. As I said, she always posts the greatest pictures and of people. I mean, it's educational because there were some folks that she posted. I didn't know of them, learned more about them, saw their monuments, so forth and so on. So I wanted to share with you, the listening audience, an opportunity again, because you could use her guide to plan your vacations when we start vacationing again. And as I was sharing with her in terms of, for those of us in education, it's a great opportunity to schedule field trips if the monuments are in your state, or even if they're not in your state for that matter. But it's a great opportunity to schedule field trips for your students. But I tell you what, we're going to work our way up to all of that. In terms of Tammy, you now taking on this work, kind of help us understand, where did this come from? Was this something you were interested in as a child? Or, because I see in your bio, your parents were entrepreneurs. Where did this whole notion of kind of like studying the ancestors and going to these various sites and travel, where did that come from?
Well, basically, when I growing up, I didn't learn about Black history, which I'm sure a lot of our, people did not. It wasn't until I went to college. Before I, we was a second Black family in the neighborhood, so everything was taught to me was European. Everything was white. When I went to college, this was my first time being surrounded around a lot of Black people. And I remember Friday nights going to a party, people playing cards and dominoes and spades, and that's when you hear like the political conversations. So while I'm sitting there waiting for my turn to play, I'm hearing words like names of Marcus Garvey and and I didn't know who Marcus Garvey was, right? So I'm sitting here and they just dropping all type of knowledge. So I would go back to my dorm and look up these people so I'll make sure when I go to the next party, I knew what they were talking about. So pretty much that's where it started, where I started reading more about Black history. Decades later, I went back to school to get my degree in African American Studies at Chicago State University. And just the atmosphere, this was my first time being educated by Black teachers. Even though Chicago State was not a HBCU, it's a PBI, it had that HBCU experience. And all my professors were African American. And going to my first time to Egypt through the study abroad with Chicago State University, it started from there. The anticipation, this was my first time going to Africa. The nervousness, I'm sitting on the plane, I'm just nervous, excited, I don't know what to expect. And getting off the plane, stepping out of the plane, and I'm seeing that the Africa sun and the heat hitting me in the face for the first time. And touching the African soil, my foot touching the soil, it was just like an energizing experience for me. And then our tour guide came to us and said, "Welcome home, my brothers and sisters." That was it. It was just like, I can't believe I'm here. And I remember I lost my luggage. They lost my luggage. My luggage was still in New York for 2 days. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let the devil steal my joy. I'm in Africa. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. And being there for 2 weeks, and when I got back home, I knew this is what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to be a professor, to sit in a classroom and just, teach to a few students. I wanted to teach everybody. And so that's when I wanted to start traveling, because I see the world as a classroom. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel like I got a PhD in African American Studies just because of my, me traveling all over the world. But that's pretty much where it started there, and I've been doing it for 10 years.
Well, this is the thing, and this work is so important for so many different reasons. One of them you alluded to when you were saying, as children, we were not exposed to our own folks. Mm-hmm. And I'm way older than you. This I probably know. And I know for a fact when I was coming through, the only African-American hero, if you will, I guess that was presented for us was Crispus Attucks. Now, see, I'm going way back because, at least when I was in my lower grades, like first, second grade, Martin Luther King was still alive. He was killed whenever I was like first, second grade, somewhere around there. But so Martin Luther King wasn't even the Black person that you heard about whenever I was a little kid in school. It was Crispus Attucks. That was the first person, the first Black person. Matter of fact, the only Black person in history books for us as I became older. And at that time, Martin Luther King had been assassinated. So now his name became popular. And of course, throughout the years, Rosa Parks. But even with that being said, for the average person, if you ask them anything now that we've had an African-American president with Barack Obama, they'll say him. But for the most part, the only two names that you get out of most people, particularly Caucasian people, is Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. It doesn't go too much beyond that. But there is so much more to us than, yes. And when I say this, folks, do not get me wrong. I don't think there's a person on the planet who loved the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King more than I. It may equal, and I'm not talking about his kids because, I'm in contact with them on Twitter as well, with Reverend Bernice and Martin Luther King III. We, every now and again, we tweet each other. So that's their dad. So ain't no way in the world I can love him more than they do because that was their dad. But I don't think there's too many more people on the planet who love Dr. King more than I do. And even with that, I still make the comment when I say there's more than just him.
Thank you. Thank you so much because I have a niece. And she knows when Black History Month, but I educate her all year because I feel like history starts at home. Learn about history starts at home. But I tell my niece on Black History Month for school, don't bring up those three names. Don't bring up Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and Martin Luther King. No, you're going to do something different. And she did the Four Little Girls, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. Even her teacher did not know about the bombing.
Right.
And so the teacher had my niece educate the students about the Four Little Girls, you know?
Absolutely. That's what I said. There is so much more to Black people, to Negroes, to African Americans, to whatever name you want to call us. There is so much more to us that's been stripped out by design. And so as I was sharing with you before we came on the air, when we were on the telephone, I'm the principal of a single gender school, an all boys school. And it's not an alternative school, is not a prison, is not that. It's a leadership school, as a matter of fact. And we do, and the kids, for the most part, the makeup is predominantly African American and Hispanic. And we do a lot of work on helping these boys understand their history and their ethnicity. And one of my favorite quotes is by Naeem Akbar, PhD, Dr. Akbar. He says, "We must learn to comfortably celebrate ourselves. Self-celebration does not necessitate the degradation of others." I'm going to read that again. "We must learn to comfortably celebrate ourselves. Self-celebration does not necessitate the degradation of others." I have that on our school website. That's on our school website.
I've used that.
So the whole thing is, folks need to understand, because I celebrate who we are doesn't take away from you. So, exactly. And that's what I need my Caucasian brothers and sisters, or our white brothers and sisters, to understand. Because I celebrate my Blackness, it don't take anything away from your whiteness. So this is where my thing was in terms of like even the whole statue thing. And this is where it's going to bring us to your book. I was not in line or in favor with this whole thing of, and I've said this before, I did a podcast on it or a blog on it. I'm not one that's in favor of this whole thing of ripping down existing statues of white heroes. I am in favor of putting up and honoring our Black heroes with statues and monuments, in addition to even the ones that you have in your book.
Yes.
So your book is so important because I guarantee you, if the average person can't get beyond, say, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, I know they're not going to be able to identify and locate where these monuments are that you have.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's very, very important. You know, we need to expound more than those three people. And with Martin Luther King, you know, people just focus on, you know, the last couple of, you know, the sentences, you know, when we all grab hands. I'm like, no, did you read the speech in its whole entirety?
Right.
I remember this past February for Black History Month, I did do about Martin Luther King, but I did about the people behind Martin Luther King. I did about A.G. Gaston. I did Rustin. I did Georgia Gilmore. You know, because I'm like, even though Dr. King, you know, is the man that he is, he wouldn't be the man he was if it wasn't for the people behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely.
That propelled him to the people where they are. So the people, they were like, oh my God, I didn't know about this. So I added a little twist because I was like, how much to talk about Martin Luther King when everybody for January and Black History Month is talking about him? And that's like, you know what? I'm just going to go and look for some unsung heroes and sheroes that played a very important role for, you know, to make Martin Luther King the man that he was. Oh,
absolutely. Because you had Ella Baker, you had her back there. Even when he made, and I just read about this not too long ago, even when Dr. King made the I Have a Dream speech, it was Mahalia Jackson who was sitting behind him, who was back there saying, tell him about the dream, Doc, tell him about the dream. Mm-hmm. And because his ear caught her saying that, that's when he shifted into the I Have a Dream. Because if you look at that, and I teach public speaking on the college level, and one of the speeches we analyze is the I Have a Dream speech. But if you look at that speech, the first part of the speech, he's reading from his notes. Go on YouTube and take a look at that, and you'll see the first part of the speech, he's really kind of referring to his notes. He's looking down at the podium, his notes. But when he shifts into that I Have a Dream part, he's not looking at any notes. But he shifted into that because Mahalia Jackson was sitting behind him saying, tell him about the dream, Doc. Tell him about the dream. So you're right in terms of the unsung heroes and the things that are unseen. And there's so many stories and examples like that.
Yes.
So I'm looking here, and like I see some of the names in here. Ida B. Wells.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking here. Let me see. I'm going through here. Ida B. Wells, Ed Johnson. We got Henry Davis, William Miller, Mabel Hallam. Let's see. We got here L. Persons, Mary Turner. Now, these are names I guarantee you are not being taught in history classes and social studies classes. They're not. And they all have stories behind them. So talk to me about, like, okay, speaking of Dr. King, I will say, because like I said, I loved his work. I really did. There was a lot of people behind him, but he was the forefront. He was the spokesperson. So years ago, my first time as an adult in Atlanta, that stayed with some friends, and I was flying out that Sunday evening to come back to New Jersey. And I said, you know what? I cannot leave here without going to the King Center, down to his grave, down to the crypt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I remembered, even as I'm sitting here telling you the story, I went down there. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun was just coming up. And I stepped down there to that grave site. And Tammy, when I tell you, like the feeling that came into my spirit, it really was, as they say, for lack of a better analogy, like stepping onto holy ground. And I'm not exaggerating. And when just the fact that I stepped up into that area where his body lie, I felt it. And I've had the same type of feelings when I've gone to other either statues or either cemeteries where our heroes are buried. I was sharing with you on the air, and I'm getting ready to look up that cemetery now, or you may already know it, where Malcolm X is buried. Mm-hmm. That's maybe a half-hour drive from where I live to me. And every now and again, I will take a drive up there. And in that same cemetery is Malcolm X, is Moms Mabley, Whitney Young, the young man that played David on Sesame Street, Adolf Caesar, he played in Soldier Story. I mean, all of them are in that same cemetery. But to go to and people say, well, you're weird. No, I'm honoring their life as well as, like you said, our ancestors. So talk to me a little bit about, like, for you, as you go to these different monuments, what did it do for you?
To me, it's educational. When I look at the statues, I tell people not only monuments and statues, are good for taking pictures, but they are educational and can bring pride and beauty to a community. And for me, when I do locate these statues, there's out of the 500 statues that I've located, only 100 were created by African Americans. And to me, that's a problem. So when I go to this, and that's the reason why I want to go to these statues, because the interviews I've done with the sculptors in my book, not only do they talk about their passion for art, but they talk about the passion, the struggles of them not getting artwork because it's not going to them. And when you have people in high positions that hire artists and sculptors to design African American statues, they don't look like us. So that was one of the main reasons why I want to locate these statues and to locate them, but just to see the beauty of the statues, how tall they are, the material. I tell people, just don't take a picture. Look at the detail. Sometimes these statues have hidden messages and symbols within the monument. Also, look for the sculptor's name and do the research on that sculptor and find out what other public art that they have, because with these statues, like for Martin Luther King and others and stuff, they may have played an important part in that city. So, these statues can definitely be teaching tools.
Oh, absolutely. Because, see, that's what, for me, the combination of spiritual and educational, that's what it's all about with these monuments. Yeah. That's why I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to fight you to take down Robert E. Lee. Let him stay up there. I could care less. I will fight you, though, to put up. And now that you even brought another facet onto that in terms of having the designer be an African American as well, that I will fight for. All right. Because there's more of us that need to be memorialized. Because, again, as I said, a lot of our great contributions have been ignored and overlooked and whitewashed and everything else to act as if we haven't contributed or done anything. And one of the ways to show what we've done is through these various memorials. One of the things that, again, going back to Dr. Akbar, For our Caucasian brothers and sisters, he says their greatness is on display every day. No matter where you turn or look, whether it's in paintings, whether it's in the monuments, whether it's in whatever, is on display in front of them every day. For me, the same thing needs to happen to all the other communities, particularly since I'm African Americans. We need to see our greatness in front of us.
Right. Right. And like I said, there are thousands and thousands of Caucasian statues and monuments. And I just found like maybe there's probably more, but it's not as many as the Caucasian statues. And that's what I wanted to, I definitely want to highlight, because as far as, because people always ask me, they was like, so what do you think about, the monuments, these Confederate monuments taken down? And I said, I do think they should not be in, public parks or on federal buildings. I think they should be, housed somewhere like, maybe a Confederate memorial or something like that, because, especially in an African-American neighborhood.
Right.
You see this statue, this Confederate statue that symbolizes hate, racial terror, and dehumanization of African-Americans that's 30 feet high, towering over an African-American community.
Correct.
To me, it seems like they still have their knees on our necks. When I was in Charlottesville, I went to Charlottesville for a conference maybe a week or two after the Tiki Torch incident that happened. And I remember I got up early in the morning and I went to the Robert E. Lee statue where, where they were at, and it was covered in tarp, and the statue is 27 feet high. And just thinking about how people just can, African Americans, that go to Charlottesville, these students that go to Charlottesville, and they see this 27 feet Confederate, monument towering over the university, So I do think that should, they should be taken down and housed somewhere. And just like J. Marion Sims, he was a father of gynecology, and he experimented on enslaved women without no anesthesia or pain.
Correct.
And he had a statue in Central Park. Now it's been taken down, and it's housed at the cemetery. They're going to put his statue in front of his gravesite. And now Betty Bagwell, she is going to be the sculptor that's going to put a statue where J. Marion Sims was, and it's called Beyond the Sims, and it's going to honor the enslaved women that J. Marion Sims experimented.
That's a good point. I will grant that. I could not agree with you more there. That's a very good point in terms of a reminder in an African American community of the oppressor.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
That point that you just brought up about the experimentation on women, yes, that was something that I've read and learned and been teaching as well. See, like I said, I had the opportunity in my school to really kind of help my students understand their past, because again, it is as if I was an alien coming to the planet, I wouldn't think anyone else did anything on the planet except Caucasian people.
Right.
And see, that's where I'm on a mission to dispel that notion for a lot of different reasons. And that's why, again, even the title of your book, Honoring the Legacy, because again, I do a lot of work on terms of the ancestors. As a matter of fact, whenever we get off air, I'll get your cell number and I'll text you a picture of my whole section that I have dedicated in my man cave in my house to the ancestors. I have an entire section the whole section is just dedicated to my ancestry. I've done a lot of work on Ancestry.com and African Ancestry, both of them. They're two different companies. One is African-American owned, the other one is not. But I've worked with both of the companies to find out my history and ancestry. And I have a whole section that's dedicated with artifacts from my grandparents and my parents and my kids. And I mean, just a whole section that's got African masks in there. A whole lot of little artifacts that's different, dedicated. I was supposed to go to South Africa a couple of years ago. Trip got put off. Then it was rescheduled, and then COVID hit. It couldn't go. So Africa is definitely on my bucket list. But what was that like for you? Because you kind of started talking a little bit about it to like get off that plane and step foot in what we call the motherland.
Yes. Oh my God! It was just when people ask me about Africa, I just start. It's like I'm a kid in a candy store. I just get so excited. But it was just an experience of a lifetime. And after I went to Egypt, then I went to Ghana. I've been to South Africa. So every year I make it a trip to go to Africa. So this year I was supposed to go to Ethiopia and Kenya. But, due to the pandemic, I know it was canceled. So hopefully I'll be able to go next year.
Right.
But I tell people, don't believe what you see on TV. And that's why I post, even when the times I've been to Africa, I always post because I want people to explore our motherland. Don't believe what you see on TV, see for yourself. The people are so nice and, welcoming and hello, my brothers and sisters. Good morning. If you need anything, it's just a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Well, see, and this is like, believe it, and this is going to sound really weird when I say this, but it's true, sadly. There are still folks that think Africa is just like Tarzan and monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
That's the perception that's in their minds when you say Africa.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of like being able to pose a show, no. Africa is just as progressive, is not more progressive than us here in the United States. As a matter of fact, when you go to my Twitter site, the Professor Medley one, if you look up in my banner, you'll see where I have my paternal and my maternal genetic ancestry. On my father's side, it was the Balanta people living in Guinea-Bissau, and on my mother's side, it was the Tikar people living in Cameroon. So my ancestry going back to Africa is tied to Guinea-Bissau and Cameroon. And also when I go to the other side, there's, because needless to say, the slaves were all over the place. Or shall I say the Africans were all over the place. They had gotten captured. So there's a part of me that's also a large part in Nigeria. And they're experiencing some turmoil right now. In terms of like just kind of knowing that, because like I said, I'm big on like knowing my background and history, and there's some there are some Caucasians in my line as well. My mother's grandfather was white. I think I'm trying to think in terms of the family tree, but I believe it was her grandfather, either great grandfather. I think it was her grandfather was Caucasian. But see, this is where we start getting into the slave masters messing with the slaves, raping the slaves, and this is how you get all these mixtures of colors and shades to begin with.
Right, exactly. Yep.
So the fact that you're talking about, because see, this is the other piece about why I was saying I have the section in my man cave that's dedicated to the ancestors. It is extremely important for us to understand and pay homage to. Because first off, you and I would not be sitting here talking today if it wasn't for our ancestry. If it wasn't for the folks there's a song by Brian Courtney Wilson. It's called Great Work. And I'll have to pull that up on one thing I love about Google and the internet, I can pull stuff up instantaneously. But there's a couple of lines in his song that deals with the ancestors. And as you're talking, when I'm off mic, I'll pull it up and I'll read it for you. But talk about why did you come up with this title, Honoring the Legacy?
Well, basically, it goes by my name, Sankofa Travel Horse. Sankofa, it means in order to have a future, you have to know your past. And what you were just talking about doing your family history is very important, that we need to go back and talk about our past and honor our past, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here today. And one of the things that I do to honor my past, I do my genealogy too. I probably have no hair because it's like a needle in a haystack.
Right.
But when I go to plantations, and go to these slave quarters and sleep in these slave cabins to honor my past, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to have the opportunities that I have today. And even though I don't know the names of our ancestors that were kept on these grounds, I can use my platform to let them know I don't know your name, but I'm going to honor you. And people ask me, well, why do you sleep in it? Because you just have to honor them. And when I sleep on a wooden floor and I sleep on a dirt floor, I lay there, I don't get any sleep, it's completely dark, and I just think through my mind, how did they endure a lifetime in bondage?
Right.
You can hear the wind go through the cabins, and these are original slave cabins. And it just hits me and I'd be laying down there in tears. And it's like a lifetime.
Right. And see, last week, it's funny because like last week I didn't have a guest, so I used the time to be my own guest. And what I will do is I will use the time that I'm doing my own commentary also as because I have a podcast as well. Not only do I have the radio show, I have a podcast. I will use that as a podcast. So I actually went into this whole thing about the wearing of the mask and the whole way we've had to deal in the pandemic as well. In the beginning, I haven't heard as much of it as now, but I'm sure it's still being said. People were comparing what we have to do, to make it through the pandemic with slavery. And I would get, Tammy, when I tell you the fur would stand, when I tell you heat it, when I would see that, I would be hot as a 45. It's like, how dare you? This is an inconvenience. Yes. Make no mistake. Yeah. But it is nowhere close to, nowhere in the realm of the atrocities of slavery. And like you just said, just to be able to be in those places and in those cabins and be on those floors, you can't help but cry.
Right. I'm just like, making that comment, that just like really just offended me on so many levels. Like, so our enslaved ancestors, they were able to read a book. They were able to cook. They were able to watch TV on a 50-inch flat screen. How dare you compare that to slavery? And me sleeping in slave quarters, I can't compare being enslaved laying on a dirt floor when I can get up and get in my car and leave.
Absolutely. When I saw it. This was even before Bill Barr had said it. I mean, there was other just everyday average Joes that had posted it. One lady, and again, I'll have to forward something. You might have seen them because this was like going a few months back. One lady, and it's a I'm trying to think. It was a Haitian princess or something that had gotten captured. And this was the picture she used on her poster saying she is not a slave, only slaves and dogs wear muzzles or something like that was in the picture. And I'll send all this stuff to you. But the person, and it might have been you. If it wasn't you, it was somebody else that had posted the history of the person that was in the picture. And that particular muzzle that was on her face was put on her by, now this is going to trip you out. It was put on her by the slave master's wife as a punishment because her husband kept raping the slave.
Oh, yeah.
So she put this on as a torture device because now her husband was raping her. So, and this was the picture that this Caucasian woman had up talking about muzzles and masks are for slaves and dogs. I was incensed. Every time I hear one or anybody compare this inconvenience, because this pandemic is serious. Don't get me wrong. It is. I don't like wearing a mask. Nobody, more than anybody else. I don't like having to stay in the house or not be able to socialize with my friends no more than anybody else. But to actually sit up there and try to compare it to slavery tells me, one, again, you're trying to negate the experience. Two, you don't understand the experience because you couldn't make a statement like that if you truly did, or you don't care about the experience. You're trying to minimize it.
Yeah.
And so, again, incensed. So I was telling you a couple of minutes ago about Brian Courtney Wilson's song, Great Work. There's a line in there. He says, so what should be considered as we proceed is that this work did not begin with you. Our mothers' mothers and fathers' fathers planted seeds when we were but the faint notion of a dream in their mind. They hoped for a harvest, a legacy, a great work. So in other words, what he was saying there was, these are like our ancestors. This experience that we were just talking about went through that, knowing that they weren't going to live through it, with the hope that their ancestors would have a better life, which is us. Mm-hmm. So that's why, again, I love the work in terms of, and it really does. And I'm passionate about this. That's why I was glad I got you on the show. It really does, like from the spiritual side and the educational side, it really does something to be, even if you go to these folks, their grave sites. And I just did look up where Malcolm and all these other folks are. It's Ferncliff Cemetery and Mausoleum in Hartsdale, New York. So I know you probably know, but I've been there.
Yeah, there's a lot of African Americans that are buried there. I've been there. I frequented there a few times.
Yes. So now, like I said, I know this one. I'm glad this one's not a stranger to you, but I've been in. And I went there one day and just for like 2-3 hours, just walked around from grave to grave. Paul Robeson and Paul Robeson and Baldwin, James Baldwin, they're right across from each other.
Yeah, and also Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee are in that section.
That's
too.
correct.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's just to be in the presence of, I may not have had the opportunity to meet them when they were alive, but I'm where they finally rested, where their bodily remains are. It's still, like you said, like when I went there, I actually put flowers on Malcolm X's graves.
Okay.
All right. I didn't know Malcolm. I mean, other than what I know from the books and the films and the history, but as far as personally meeting him, but still, just to go there and put flowers on it, like, wow, I got a chance to put flowers on Malcolm X's grave.
And I also love going to cemeteries, too, to see what people left behind. You know, the number, like Medgar Evers in Arlington Cemetery. You can see so many stones around his headstone. And like Jackie Robinson, it'd be like 50 bats, 20 baseballs. I mean, his whole cemetery, you can hardly see the headstone because it's so many people leave so many stuff there. But actually, cemeteries are becoming real popular because people are doing cemetery tours right now.
Right.
When people thought it was kind of creepy and scary, because when I started doing it, people was like, why are you going to see dead people? You know? But now people was like, can you give me a list of cemeteries to go to and who's buried there? So it's becoming real popular now that people are doing, going to cemeteries, doing cemetery tours.
I'm looking here, and I'm on page 91 in the book, and I'm seeing now the actual photos. And I see that you do acknowledge the sculptor, which we were talking about a little bit earlier. I see the one of Harold Washington, Sojourner Truth, Adam Clayton. Oh, Adam Clayton Powell is one of my favorite people. Adam Clayton Powell, Denmark Vesey. All right, now Willie Harrington, Frederick Douglass, Billie Holiday, Richard Pryor. Wow. My mom lives down in Georgia in Louisville, so I went up to Augusta and I saw the James Brown statue. Let's see, Kathleen.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kathleen Cooper. Let me see, Whitney Young. Yep, Allentown, PA. A. Philip Randolph. Right. Harriet Tubman. Frankie.
Now these are statues that were designed by African Americans. So
okay.
That's why So these are the ones that I made sure that I want to have photos of the ones that were designed by African Americans. But the Denmark Vesey, I want to talk about that because just recently. An organization, they were mad because they took down the John C. Calhoun statue earlier this year.
Right.
So now they want to fight to take down the Denmark Vesey statue because they said that if he would have succeeded in his revolt, they would have killed thousands and thousands of white people. So now they're fighting to have his statue taken down.
Well, see, that was one of my premises in terms of why I'm not necessarily fighting to take down it, because that was one of my main questions. Well, what happens when now they turn around and say, well, we're going to take down your Martin Luther King statue. You took down ours, we're going to take down yours. So I was saying, people they're small-minded like that. They're childish like that.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, okay, I'm not going to get into that. But now that issue you brought up was a very good point in terms of it now towering over an African-American community. That's a little bit different. Now, see, that I hadn't even thought of. You gave me something else, another perspective there on that one. So that I can kind of say, yeah, I see that. But just taking them down for the sake of taking them down, no. But for that same, but in terms of building them up, by all means, build up as many as possible, and put them, like you said, in the African American community.
Right, and I'm not saying every statue should be taken down, but like for instance, when I go to some of these Caucasian statues and I see a plaque, American hero,
right?
This, okay, but does it say it was a slave owner? You got to tell the whole story. You have to tell the whole story. And like I'm from Chicago, they took down 2 Christopher Columbus statues. Now, what bothers me is John Baptiste du Sable was the founder of Chicago. He has a little teeny weeny bust downtown Chicago. When you see even Harry Carey, okay,
right.
He was a sportscaster.
Right.
He has a huge statue, and here's his little bust of John Baptiste du Sable. So I'm trying to get in contact with the mayor and like, okay, you took down these 2 statues of Christopher Columbus. There should be a 50-foot statue of John Baptiste du Sable, and not this little bust.
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, I'm looking through here, and I didn't even I'm looking at this list just on the first page in Alabama. So Eddie Kendricks has a statue.
Oh yeah, he's from is that Birmingham? Yeah, he's from Birmingham.
Okay,
and it's also a park. So it's the Eddie Kendrick Park, and there right by the park is the statues of not just him, but the bas relief of the other members of the Temptations.
All right. Let's see. Bo Jackson, he has a statue. Cam Newton already. Cam is still alive and playing. He has a statue already.
Yes, he does.
All right. Well, you see, this is where the education piece comes in.
Yes.
Jesse Owens, I'm not surprised that. W.C. Handy, William Cooper Council, Joe Louis. I've been to his grave in Arlington. Coretta Scott King. Of course, I've been to her grave because she's now buried next to her husband. Rosa Parks. Selma. I'm looking at Selma. Let's see. George Washington Carver. Not surprised with that. Duke Ellington. All right. Got a statue of him. Harriet Tubman. Bass Reeves. U.S. Colored Troops. Harriet Tubman. Little Rock. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, I'm not surprised with Dr. King being all over the place. Dorothy Dandridge has a statue in Hollywood. All right.
And it don't look nothing like her. And I've been to so many statues like that don't look like the person too. So that's another thing too. You're going to look at statues, and I'm like, okay, I don't look like Dorothy Dandridge. I don't look like Martin Luther King, So who? And then I look for the soldier's name. Who designed this? Who designed this?
And you say, okay, whose interpretation and design is this? That's right. Say, that does not look like them at all. Twisted and, yes, I understand. Okay, I'm looking at Wilmington here. That's where my mom is from. I'm assuming that's Wilmington, Delaware. I thought it was Wilmington, North Carolina. But I'm thinking, okay, African-American. My kids went to school in Delaware. All right. So, I mean, again, from an education standpoint, and again, being an educator and working in the school system, this is going to be a great guide for me in terms of particularly the states around New Jersey, that's in bus riding distance, to plan some field trips to go see. Because the other piece of it is exposure. A book like this, now, like I said, you've just been added to my library that's going to be in my school. A book like this now, at least if the kids are exposed to it, at least they can say, yes, there are some statues around the country of people who look like me.
Right. And I've used statues as an outdoor museum. You social distance and you're not inside.
Absolutely.
One of my friends said that she's going to have it with her assignment where she's going to have a student go to a statue, take a picture, and write a report on it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. From the education standpoint, this is a gold mine. And like I said, for me, it's a perfect fit for the school that I'm leading and, our mission of what we're doing with the boys in terms of their self-esteem and helping them understand that they've come from people that has contributed greatness. Because we're in a society, unfortunately, that if we listen to society and some of the things that are said, you would think, like I said, either we don't exist or we're the dregs of the earth. And that's just not true. And see, as a proud African-American man, I don't accept that, and I don't allow anybody around me to accept that. You're not just going to say anything to me. Matter of fact, I was thinking this morning I might do my podcast or commentary on this whole notion of the words "you people," quote unquote. Like, what is that? What is "you people," quote unquote? I'm going to do something on that. I got to keep brainstorming on how I want to word it. But again, honoring the legacy, folks need to understand. Matter of fact, this is the other thing, and this is what I tell folks, because for me, like I gave you the quote earlier about every group celebrating themselves. If you're Italian and you want to celebrate Italy, fine. If you're Jewish and you want to celebrate your Judaism or you being fine. Just don't stomp on me for wanting to celebrate my blackness. So not only should African Americans have this book, but probably more importantly, all the rest of the groups need to have a book like this.
Exactly. Absolutely. Because like I said, this is, I tell people this is educational. The book, not only is it, educational, but it's also, if you love Black history, you love Black art, and you love to travel, this book is definitely for you. No question, because one, we need to know that it's there. I'm looking at your website and I see your
your hoodie that said "I am Black History." Absolutely, I have a T-shirt that says "Honoring My Ancestors" or something like that. Something, but by all means. And then you got a chance to share it with our kids, because I was having this conversation with our students the other day, and me and the teacher were saying, "Boys, we're having conversations with you that no one had with us at your age in school." We have an opportunity to do that. See, I'm looking at you now going to Ida B. Wells, looking at that monument there. I'm looking at your little video on your website as I'm talking to you. I see you in front of the pyramids. They haven't figured out to this day how those pyramids were built mathematically. Haven't figured that out. That's in Africa. Egypt is in Africa. Tammy, you'd be surprised with how many people don't realize Egypt is in Africa.
And you know what? For a long time, I thought the pyramids was just sand. And when I was standing there, I had to have my classmates pinch me. Am I here? Pinch me. And then we were able to climb up a little bit up on the pyramids. I was like, oh my God, this is surreal. I can't believe this is happening.
And I am going to be the same way whenever I finally get there, because I do intend to get there. I am going to be the same way. And I'm an Alpha. I know you know fraternities and sororities, but I'm an Alpha, and we have the Sphinx and the pyramids as a part of our. Yeah. So I know when I get there, I'm going to be like
already.
that.
I know already. I know you're going to be throwing up the hand signal and everything. Have your black and gold on.
That's absolutely right. So
you probably be parried down, huh?
That's absolutely right. So when
but that's why but that's why I post these photos, because going to Africa, people's like, well, don't they have homeless people? What's the difference within the United States?
Right.
Come on now.
That's absolutely
there's
right.
Poverty there, but there's poverty here. It's probably even worse in the United States.
Absolutely. But no, this is wonderful. I mean, and how do you, and this is going to, maybe it'll sound personal, I don't know, but how do you finance these trips? Or do you just kind of save for them, or you go through travel aid? How do you make that happen?
Well, I'm a loctician, and that's my full-time job. I've been a loctician for almost 11 years. And so I have a big clientele, and that provided me the opportunities to travel. So actually it started as a passion, because I love to travel. So I have people saying, you know what, maybe you should, get grants and stuff and get some corporate sponsors. So that's what I'm working on now. But this has been my passion. And if that's fine, then I can. But I'm in a position where I travel once a month for a week. I take a week off every month, and I get in my car or I fly and I travel. And I just locate stuff because I love to travel. I love nature. I love history. So that's what I'm currently working on now.
Well, I hear you, because I've had a chance now. Oddly enough, like I said, my last trip that was planned was to South Africa. My other trips have been to Europe, and it's been with the schools, with the EF tours. We've done that in terms of taking kids over. Taking kids. We took them to France. We've taken them to Italy. We've taken them to Germany. Mm-hmm. We've done Switzerland. I've done the European, and the trip that we had scheduled was South Africa. That was the next one coming up. And that's when COVID hit, and then, that scrapped that. But, whenever COVID's done and we get a chance to go again, certainly South Africa's going to be first on the list. And now that I kind of know my background in terms of Guinea-Bissau and Cameroon, I may try to at some point get to them as well. But, this is the thing. You cannot beat travel. I remember when we were in Germany, and at the time, this is going back a few years ago, the kid was like 12 years old at the time. And he looked at me, he said, "Mr. Medley, I can't believe I'm bike riding in Germany." And I knew exactly like that surreal feeling you were talking about. That's what he was feeling as a toy. Because again, at 12 years old, the only place, and I'm not saying it's nothing bad when I say it, but at 12 years old, where I had been was in Virginia and North Carolina, because we went down south. For those of us in the North, African Americans, we went down south. That's where. But this was a kid now at 12 that had already now traveled overseas. I didn't have my first plane ride until I was 19. My first plane ride was to Florida to Disney World at 19 years old.
My first riding on the plane was I was 35 years old.
Okay, see, and then, I'm drawing. So this is a kid now that's experiencing international travel starting like 11, 12 years old. So that's why he's like, Mr. Medley, I can't believe I'm bike riding in Germany. And that's the same way, like we were just laughing about me going over to the pyramid. That's the same way, trust me, I'm going to be when I get to Africa and get in front of the Sphinx and the pyramids. Like,
you're going to be like, everybody get out the way, get out the way. I don't want no heads. I don't want nobody. You don't want to know how to take a correct picture because you have people that just snap and cut your head off. I need someone that's experienced in taking that right, perfect shot.
But it is. But
of a lifetime.
That's absolutely right.
That up.
And so travel is like a world classroom. Like you were talking about museums, you were talking about, the various monuments, but travel is a world classroom. As a matter of fact, those of you in the listening audience, if you can save your nickels and put your quarters together, it is worth every bit of it. And that's why I was asking the question a couple of minutes about, like, how do you do? But if that's part of the job. I mean, I always wanted to be a pilot. Matter of fact, I still get giddy whenever I work with pilots. I had a pilot come in and speak to the kids, and I was worse than the kids. When he came in here, I was more giddy than the kids were. And it was an African-American pilot, and he came in his full uniform, 4 stripes and all, captain. But I'm saying all that to say he was sharing with the boys, what better combination could you have than to get paid to travel?
Yeah.
You get paid to travel. He's like, he's absolutely right. He gave the examples of he could be one place in the morning, another place in the afternoon, and so forth and so on. It's the same type deal, and it is the world classroom. Because like at this point now, when I'm looking on TV or on videos or looking at books and I see the Eiffel Tower, I say, oh, I've been there. When I see the wall, the Great Wall in China, ooh, I've been on that wall. Whenever I see, these things that are in history books and places, I've been. So I'm going to get to that pyramid. I'm going to get to that Sphinx. Because I'm going to be able to say, ooh, I've been there. But that's the way I am now with the Eiffel Tower, with the China Wall, with France out there with the Shams jail, whatever they call their main drag over there, their main street in that area. I've been on that. So when you start talking about the Mona Lisa and the Louvre and all, you've been there. So I want to, you cannot, I'm saying all that to say is you cannot beat travel. And then when you can tie it to your ethnicity like you're doing, it just don't get any better than that.
Right. And it's very important that we get our young people to go and travel because, I'm from Chicago. Some of our kids never been downtown Chicago.
I know.
And it's very sad. And so I have a grandson, he's, 18 months old.
Right.
He's going to travel. He got his grandma. He's going to be my buddy. Watch. When he's able to walk and hold a camera and take a picture, oh, it's on.
I know that's right. I know that is right. I mean, and again, you just cannot. It doesn't compare. I mean, it's great to have it in the history books. It's another thing to have that history come to life for you and then go back to the history book. Like I just said, I've been there. Like even when you say Chicago, I've been blessed to have the opportunity out of the 50 states in the United States. I think I've been to about 35 of them. There's only about 15 of them I haven't been to, but about 35 out of the 50, I've had an opportunity to be in some city. I've been to Chicago. Matter of fact, when I was in the Air Force, I did my schooling, my training in Rantoul, Illinois. It's a tiny city, not too far from Chicago, maybe an hour or so. There was an Air Force base out there that's no longer there, Chanute Air Force Base. But I did my training there. So I've been to Illinois. I mean, I've been to Georgia. I've been to Florida. I've been to Arizona. I've been to California. I've been to Minnesota. I've been to, Wisconsin. I've been to most of our states. And again, a lot of these times, especially if you're watching sports or something, like, oh, I've seen that stadium. Oh, I've been by that. The other day I was watching TV and they put a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge on there in San Francisco. I said, oh, I've driven across that bridge.
Yeah.
So you cannot beat the experience of being or having the opportunity to visit these places. And as you just said, for your grandson, for anyone that has an opportunity, rather than, and I have nothing against Michael Jordan and the Nike and the sneakers, but rather than, buying all these Jordans, put that money away so that you can, have your child travel or you can travel.
Exactly. Because I put all my money into, look, people like, My sister, she goes to all the high-end stores. I go to Walmart. I go to Salvation Army. That's how I am. I put my money into my travel.
Right.
Because that's just the memory of just saying, like you said, oh, I've been there, been there, done that. So yeah.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening, we cannot encourage that enough. And I get it. We can't travel right now. We're in a lockdown for the most part because of the pandemic. But once this is over, if it ever gets over, which it will, and it's lifted and we can go and move about the cabin again, I highly encourage you to do that. And if there are some places local, and that's what I love about this book, because I'm going to be looking New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, driving distance for me. And then whenever I do fly to another state, I'm going to take this with me and say, okay, where am I in relation to where this monument is?
Mm-hmm.
Because
absolutely. Take pictures, and even if you're in your hometown,
right,
there's a lot of outdoor activities you can go to. Like I said, you can go to a statues monument. You can go to a cemetery. Hardly nobody there. You can learn a lot of history about that cemetery, about the people that are buried there, and also the statues, the symbols, the anvil. That person was most likely a blacksmith, so you can learn a lot. Definitely going to a cemetery. Just looking at the headstones and the sayings and the quotes and everything on it. So you can definitely learn a lot. No question.
Like that day when I was in Ferncliff, like I said, it was earlier. It was back in, this is October. That was in July or either August. And I took my mask with me. I went, walked around. Like I said, I think it was only one burial going on, because at the time with this pandemic, they're not even really doing big funerals and everything, so there was only one burial going on. I had, for the most part, the cemetery to myself, me and the workers. And Tammy, I walked around, like I said, from grave to grave to grave. Like I said, I saw David's grave, Northern J. Calloway from Sesame Street. And also in there, it's not only African Americans in there. There's Judy Garland's in there from The Wizard of Oz, and there was there was a whole Cab Calloway is in there. There was a whole list of folks who are in that one cemetery.
Yeah.
So just
Big
there,
Mama Thornton.
Yes. So in that one day, you could just take a day there and walk around and, like she said, absorb and take in the history. Mm-hmm. With the advent of search engines such as Google, you can look up the person and the history before or after you go. And see again. So what I love is when people call me or send me an email, Tammy, I'm in Mississippi, Alabama. Can you send me someplace? I love it. So if anybody's going somewhere, right, look me up, and I will definitely give you a list of places to go to. Well, you know what? That is a great segue into the last part of the show, which is I give you, the author, the opportunity to promote, and you can say anything with the exception of the dollar amount. But as far as websites, contact information, your social media sites, any book signings, how they can get your book, I'm going to turn the mic off, and this is your opportunity to promote all that you would like. Shout out anybody that you would like. Like I said, you can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount. Okay.
So I'm Tammy Gibson. You can follow me. My website is sankofatravelher.com, SankofaTravelher. That's my website. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. What else? I do have a couple of upcoming Zoom presentations. So if you follow me and sign up, you will definitely get information regarding my events will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. But if you have any questions, if there's someplace you want to go to on vacation or a family reunion plan, and you want some places to go, some hidden nuggets, please let me know, because I have all the information you need.
All right. You know what? Usually that's the end of the interview, but I do have one more question for you, going back to something you said about how you came up with the name of Sankofa, because I actually, in my office, have a little Sankofa bird in there. Talk a little bit about that bird.
Well, I'm looking at it, mine's right now. But it's a bird and has its neck going back, and it represents, in order to have a future, you definitely have to know your past.
Correct.
So I have this can for birds all over my condo. I just love the symbol. And when I was trying to figure out the name for it, I was just going through the internet, and when I saw the bird, I was like, that's it. And then I said travel, and I added the HER, female, and Sankofa Travel Her.
There you go, folks. I started the show talking about how I named some of my songs on my CDs because I'd introduced a local artist with his CD. So I had actually, the work that's going on in the background of us right now is my original compositions. And I was explaining to the audience that there is no artist, or whether it's a musician, author, or whatever, that there's not a reason behind why they name their work or themselves what they name them. And here you ended the show with exactly where I began. You explained how you came up with your name, the Sankofa. The Traveler, Her, Her. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you know what? Again, Tammy, we're definitely going to be in touch. I'm going to, I record the show, and probably before the day is out or either tomorrow night is out, I will have uploaded it up on my YouTube channel. I will get the link to you, and at that point, you can do what you want with it in terms of getting folks to access it. I will also send you the link in an MP3 format, so that you can, email it, share it, do it, put it up or load it up on your site, whatever you want to do with it. But you will definitely be in the archives on my YouTube channel, and folks can catch the interview there for those that didn't rise early like me and you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for the opportunity. And remember, Black History is more than 28 days.
I know that's right. So with that being said, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will definitely be in touch.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Same here. Take care.
Okay, you too.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. And as I said, the wonderful advent of that thing called Google or any of the search engines, we can search information in seconds. And I'm sitting here looking at the Sankofa definition, at least out of Wikipedia. And because I have the Sankofa bird in my office. Sankofa is a word in the Twi language of Ghana that translates to, quote, go back and get it, unquote, and also refers to the Bono Adinkra symbol, represented either with a stylized heart shape or by a bird with its head turned backwards while its feet face forward, carrying a precious egg in its mouth. And again, I have a little symbol of that in my office. Now that she's brought it back up, I got to see if I can, I'm going to have to order some more symbols with the Sankofa bird.